Did you know if you make minimum wage in the state of California, you are in the top 1% wealthiest people in the entire world? Time to think like an investor. Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're new here, my name is Josh. I'm a certified financial planner and a wealth manager, and that means I spend a lot of time thinking about wealth and thinking about money and dealing with people's finances and seeing the weird tricks people's minds kind of play on themselves. And one thing I've always found interesting is when we think about wealth, what really is wealth? What does it mean for someone to be wealthy? The reality is for most people like you and I, we tend to see wealthy as just anybody who has more than we do. Someone who has a lot more than we do is very wealthy, and someone who has a little less than us is not wealthy. It's completely relative to where we are and what we're exposed to. For me personally, I always viewed it as purely something about resources and influence. You're a wealthy person if you have a lot of money, or you have a lot of assets, or you have complete freedom of your time and schedule. But what I've realized more and more over time as I've kind of started to come into those things of having a little bit more disposable income and having assets that grow and feeling a little bit wealthier than I was when I first started my career, I start to realize there's a lot of things that, it's so cliche, but there's so many things that money can't buy regardless how wealthy you are. And today I want to just talk about some of the most mind-boggling facts about how easy it really is to be considered one of the wealthiest people in the entire world. So if for whatever reason you're not convinced that you're a very wealthy person, I bet in a very short period of time I can convince you that you are. And it's really important because it's important to be grateful and realize that if you added up the suffering and the difficulties of every single person in the world and you put it in the middle, and then you divided it up and gave everybody an equal share, you would have way more than you do now. Now, there's a lot of things that have blown me away with how wealthy it can make me seem without having an explicit monetary value. And one of the things that comes to mind is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, after Bill Gates was finished implanting all of us with microchips,
you can read more about vaccines and the investments we've made.
Actually went and did some charitable work, and he found that only 1 in 20 people in the entire world have no health complications. If you have no health complications, you are in the wealthiest 5% of people in the entire world. And if you think that money and resources is a better sign of wealth than having health, you're a lunatic, you're nuts. That makes absolutely no sense. There are people out there who are billionaires who are paying to have their life extended every single year by going through expensive medical treatments and going to the Mayo Clinic and paying to have their life extended. You, as somebody with no health complications, are somebody who is in a position where you have something that every billionaire who's extending their life wishes they had but cannot buy. It is mind-boggling. You are in the top 5% of people in the world if you have no health complications. Recently, we've come into a ton of research of how important it is to sleep. It is insane how much heart disease, which is the #1 killer of Americans, and kidney disease and stroke and mental health and all of these terrible ailments people have in our modern society are linked to the lack of sleep. There's more and more research coming about this all the time, and people continue to tell us it is so important to prioritize your sleep. So it's clear to see that if you're someone who can prioritize getting 8 hours of sleep a night and getting the amount that were recommended, that is certainly a sign of wealth. I mean, do you want to be someone who has a ton of money and a ton of resources, but is constantly fatigued and is battling mental health because you're not sleeping enough? Well, this is a wild stat. If you're somebody who has no problem prioritizing getting 8 hours of sleep per night, you are in the top 1% of people worldwide. There are many countries all over the world who are completely sleep deprived. In Japan, they have a term called karoshi, and it's a very popular term. I may have botched the pronunciation, but it essentially means death by sleep deprivation. It's unbelievably common. I'm not sure about you, but if you've ever tried to fall asleep and it's just way too hot and there's like no air conditioning, you have no control of the temperature, all that you wish in your life is that you had AC, or that you were in somewhere where you could sleep comfortably, because you're in your bed and you're getting sweaty and you can't fall asleep and there's stuff to do early in the morning and you start crying, and now you're crying and your bed's even more wet than the sweat. It's a big, massive mess. I've been there. Here's the wild thing. Only 1/3 of the entire world has air conditioning. And in some of the hottest, most deprived countries, they have no air conditioning whatsoever. So if you have control over the temperature that you work and live and sleep in, you are at a massive advantage. You are one of the wealthiest people in the world. Another thing to think about is, can you speak your mind about your society or your life or your job without feeling like you're going to harm your reputation or your finances or your ability to earn an income? Do you feel as if you can't really say what you desire to say? For most people, that's totally the case. The crazy thing is that only 8% of the world, 8% of the population lives in a completely democratic society. A very large portion of the world, a third of the world, actually lives under authoritarian regimes. Things like you could consider North Korea, or maybe a little less so China, where there are certain things that you can and can't say regardless how much you want to express them. So if you have the ability to go on social media or to go to your boss and tell them how much they're disappointing you or tell them how much they're oppressing you, you are actually at a massive advantage, because in most places you would get fired, or in the case of North Korea, you would just get murdered on the spot. China and India, which have almost 40% of the world's population in those two countries, have some of the worst rankings in the Freedom of Speech Index. So there are billions of people across the world who don't have the ability to say what they mean or feel. So if you do have the ability to say what you mean or feel without losing your job or losing your income, that is a massive sign of wealth. You are actually probably in the top 10% of people in terms of wealth in your freedom to express yourself. After working with hundreds of clients in my business and helping them sort out their investments and their financial plans, one thing that is a recurring theme over and over and over is that people never feel wealthy if they continue to experience what we call lifestyle creep. If every single time something good happens to you in your career, or you get a raise, or you get a bonus, your immediate reaction is to go and buy more and more things because you believe happiness or wealth is some external thing, the less and less wealthy you're going to feel. Because when you make these forward movements in life, but your spending and your expectations arise along with it, you never actually feel like you're getting ahead. It's really interesting. Whereas somebody who is in a position where they can get the goalpost to stop moving, that's when they start to experience that feeling of true wealth. And lastly, if you make over $33,000 per year, statistically, you are in the top 1% of all people in the entire world from an income perspective. So the moral of the story here, it is unbelievably important to assess your situation and see how much gratitude you owe the world, because things could be an awful lot worse. And before you complain about wealthy people or the 1% or these oppressive groups, it might be important to take a look at your situation and measure it against the world instead of your own city, or against Manhattan, or against the best country in the world. So I hope some of these facts and some of these perspectives have changed your ideas on what it really means to be wealthy, or changed your self-assessment of how wealthy you think you really are. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video whatsoever, make sure to support the channel by hitting that like button below, hit subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more videos just like this one every single week. Until next time.